Good day, Honors Biology students. Welcome to Video Lecture Episode 9. Today we're continuing our discussion in Section 2, beginning at Slide 63. And remember, we're in sex-linked traits, and in particular, we're going to start today off with hemophilia. Now, hemophilia is characterized by delayed clotting of the blood, as seen in the image there on Slide 63. Now, this condition is more common among males, just as red-green color blindness was. Now, if you look at slide 64, you see an image on there. That's a figure 11.3, which illustrates a famous pedigree of hemophilia. Now, let's zoom in on slide 65 and see that a little better, and that's Queen Victoria's pedigree. Okay, and once again, if you look at the bottom of the image, it indicates what each of those symbols represents. In other words, circles, squares, and the colors red versus yellow represent. Now, if you notice, look, a non-carrier female is a circle, a normal male is a square, a carrier female is half red and half yellow, a possible carrier has a question mark in the yellow, and that's a possible carrier female, and then an affected male is the red square. All right? Now, let's move on a little bit to this discussion in slide 66. Men who have hemophilia usually die at a young age up until the 20th century. At that point, clotting factors were discovered and thus were given to those with hemophilia to help with the delayed clotting they experienced due to the condition. So up until the 20th century, pretty much if you got this as a young male, you were going to die. But now we actually have ways to help with this. Now, sadly, blood-borne viruses such as hepatitis C and HIV were often contracted by hemophiliacs before the 1990s due to the blood transfusion methods used. They weren't the ones like we use. I'm not 100% sure what they were, but they were different. In the 90s, with better methods, this made blood transfusions safer, so they wouldn't have to worry about contracting hepatitis C or HIV. And as a result, they could get the blood that they needed. So it's, a plus on both directions. Now let's move to slide 68 and let's talk about polygenic traits. Okay? So far we have examined traits which were determined by a pair of genes. Now we're going to briefly consider traits which arise from the interaction of multiple pairs of genes, which we call polygenic traits. Now, an example of a polygenic trait is skin color. Now, if you look at figure 11.14, which is on slide 69, we see the possible shades of skin color can be. And if you notice, man, that is a lot of varieties in there. All right. Now, notice the intermediate phenotypes are actually more common than the extremes. And if you look on slides 69 and 70, the extremes would be on that image on the far left-hand and the far right-hand side. Those extremes are not as often, and it's the ones, the three, and actually in the middle, the 2, 3, and 4, which are more common, and that's what we see. Now, let's consider some other polygenic traits. Some other polygenic traits include height, eye color, and even fingerprint patterns. Okay. Well, now we're going to conclude our discussion with just a couple more slides, and we're going to talk about environmental influences, okay? We're going to discuss what role does the environment play in phenotypic characteristics. Now, as we know, heart disease can be inherited, means it can be passed on genetically, but environmental factors such as diet and exercise can also contribute to both the occurrence and the seriousness of the disease. In considering environmental influences, we will briefly mention two. One being sunlight and water, the second being temperature. So let's start with sunlight and water. Well, if most plants do not receive enough sunlight, they will not produce flowers. In addition, many plants lose leaves as a result of actually water deficiency. Keep that in mind. Temperature, okay? Most organisms, when experiencing extreme temperatures, also experience extreme phenotypic changes. For example, plants, when experiencing extreme heat, have drooping leaves. In other words, the leaves all of a sudden almost hanging their head down because they're sad because of just the extreme lack of something they need. Now, this example may not surprise, as you have seen what heat does to plants, but you probably didn't know it was a phenotypic change, which is pretty interesting to think about. Temperature can also influence the expression of genes. Now, looking at slide 77, where we're going to finish today, look at that picture of the Siamese cat in figure 11.15. This is actually an example of a phenotypic influence from nature, that being from temperature. All right. Well, I do hope this lecture has been helpful. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. Reach out to me via email, and have a nice day, and I'll see you in lecture. Goodbye.